When most people are picturing a luxury home, they're picturing really high-end gated neighborhood or, downtown high-rise condo or something like that. But the smartest luxury buyers right now are getting away from that lifestyle. Instead of focusing on that downtown or that city area, they're starting to look 30 to 60 miles outside of those areas. And that's especially true here in Central Texas, outside of Austin and San Antonio in the Texas Hill Country. They're trading all that stuff in for private water. They're trading it in for no freeway traffic. They're trading it in so that when you walk outside at night, you don't hear sirens and you don't hear your neighbor's TV or radio. You hear nature and you see stars. And that's what this video is about. I'm going to tell you why that's happening, what these buyers are looking for, where they're going, and I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip to show you how to plan for the real new luxury purchase. And here in Central Texas, if you're looking in that $1 million plus price range, you're kind of left with two options. You can buy something that's really, really nice right now, or you can take the option that I'm talking about, which is buying more for the long term, the long haul, and something that's going to maintain that value a lot differently and probably gain value a lot differently than what's going on inside of towns like Austin and San Antonio. And here's the overall setup on it. The Texas Hill Country, which is that area that wraps around the west side of Austin and San Antonio and extends west, until the hills stop. That's why they call it the Hill Country, right? Well, it's becoming a real strategic choice for people. And that's starting to show up in publications as well. Sotheby's International Realty, in their 2025 luxury outlook, they ranked Austin among the top 10 luxury destinations. But again, when you look at that outlook, it doesn't talk about Austin proper. It talks about the Hill Country. It talks about the area outside of Austin. And Haven Lifestyles identified 5 Hill Country cities as the most coveted for high-end real estate this year. And those are the cities I'm going to talk to you about today a little bit later on in the video. And so what's changed? Why are high worth individuals looking outside of the cities? Why does Fredericksburg have a neighborhood where it's going to cost you $5 or $6 million just to get into it? And Fredericksburg's an hour and a half from downtown Austin. What's causing this shift? The first thing that we're finding is that people are now looking for, how do I live my best life? I want that lifestyle and I want location. And if I can combine those into the same property, it's going to be a win for me as a luxury buyer. And if you look at recent survey data, people are giving lifestyle, community, and connection rankings way above proximity to downtown. And the buyer calls I'm getting now, I'm starting to see it more and more, and it's a repeating theme. We want more space. We want more privacy. I want to be able to look out of my window and see beautiful things. I don't want to look at my neighbor's house. And I'm constantly going for work. I'm constantly traveling and in the office and out of the office, and I'm going. And when I get home, I just want to be a part of a slower pace of life. But the thing that is really, really drawing them to the Texas Hill Country is they want all of those things, but they don't want to lose the access to Austin and San Antonio. The second thing driving the shift is that you're actually still seeing good value for land. If you buy $1 million house inside of Austin, you're probably going to have a swimming pool and a view of the side of the back of your neighbor's house. You're not going to get much. But out here, when you're spending that kind of money, you're getting views, you're getting land, you're getting that peace and that privacy. You're probably even going to be able to start identifying waterfront properties for a point that is the same price of what you're going to find for a nice house in Austin. But when you look at it all and you look at where else that's available, try to get what you can get in the Texas Hill Country and other regions like Napa or Aspen or something like that. It's just not going to happen. The third thing driving the shift right now is that people are tending to want to find what they're calling legacy properties. I've got a lot more buyers now that are wanting larger pieces of property, maybe something that's on water, but they're looking at it from a really, really long-term perspective. If they've got kids now, they're actually planning to be on this property so long-term that, their kids are going to bring the grandkids over, when there's grandkids around. And then when the owners and the people who have built this, when they're dead and gone, it's going to pass on to the family and it's going to remain a legacy property in that family. And that's kind of something that they're wanting to give to their family. So we're starting to see that more and more in this shift as well. And then the other thing that's really driving that shift right now is that these towns that I'm going to tell you about in a little bit, the ones that they're very highly rated for people wanting luxury outside of Austin and San Antonio, it wasn't long ago, and they just didn't have the infrastructure to add a lot of housing or high-end housing. But that infrastructure is changing now. These cities that I'm about to talk about, they're putting in infrastructure. They're putting in new roads and bridges. They're running water and gas lines out to areas that didn't have those before, and the electric grid is expanding even more and more out there. So there's a higher capacity for this to happen now than there was, like I said, even 10 years ago. All right, now that you've got a little bit of an idea of what's driving that shift, let's go back to those cities that Haven Lifestyle was talking about. The first one, very, very well known, even outside of Central Texas, is called Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg has a lot of German heritage. When I was a kid going to Fredericksburg, it was full of junk shops, antique shops, and things like that. But now high-end restaurants, high-end boutiques. Like I mentioned earlier, Boot Hill is a subdivision out there where it's going to cost millions of dollars to even get in the gate. And that's what Fredericksburg's becoming now. That area around Fredericksburg is now starting to be called the Napa Valley of Texas. And sure, you can argue that it's not Napa Valley and the wine isn't as good and there's not as many vineyards, whatever. This is just what they've been calling that area. And when I talk to people from California that have knowledge of Napa Valley before it was Napa Valley, they tell me, yeah, Chris, this is what Napa Valley looked like before it became what it is now. So when you see all of the money that's going in out there, and whether it's people that are building vineyards and wine tasting rooms and wineries and things like that, or it's the people that are spending millions of dollars and having this as their second or third home, or this is their retirement dream out on 30 or 40 acres. When you see the type of money that's being invested out there, that's why they're starting to call it the Napa Valley of Texas. And when you're considering making a move like this, one of the things that you always have to think about is, okay, this is what's happening, but does it have longevity? Like, we'll take Fredericksburg since we're talking about it. Why is it that people are going to move there, and why are people going to continue to move there in the future? Especially if the price of entry just keeps going up and up. Well, it's about 75 miles from downtown Austin. It's about 65 miles from downtown San Antonio, and the San Antonio airport is about an hour away. Austin International Airport is about an hour and a half. So just in terms of a strategic location, kind of halfway between two major metro areas, Fredericksburg is going to have a lot of staying power in this climate with these luxury buyers. And if you're liking what Fredericksburg sounds like, I'll give you a few extra buyer insights here. First of all, this area is going to be great for acreage, and I mean starting really in Johnson City and going all the way out to Harper on the other side and down to Kerrville. Great for buying acreage. Vineyard estates are all over the place, like I had mentioned, or even just quiet retreats. And a lot of people now are starting to do wellness retreats as a part of their house. And when you can develop that in an area that just doesn't have a ton of traffic, and you can get on some back roads that don't have much traffic still around Fredericksburg. So when you can develop these wellness retreats, that's going to give it, again, a lot more staying power. And there's always some downsides, right? And that distance is a concern for some people. Your major medical is going to be in Austin and in San Antonio, and if you need specialized care at some point, if this is going to be a retirement property, if you need specialized care at some point, you're going to be traveling at least an hour and a half to go to that specialized care. So that's always something to consider if you're going to be moving out to an area like this. The other thing that I always have to caution people against is make sure that you're checking on zoning for a property. Make sure you're checking on water rights. This part of Texas, water rights is going to become really, really important in the not too distant future. All right, the second town that Haven Lifestyles talks about in the Hill Country is Marble Falls, Texas. Now, Marble Falls is where there's a few things going on in Marble Falls. First of all, the Colorado River comes through, and the Highland chain of lakes. If you think about Austin, if you're familiar, Town Lake runs right through Austin. That's the Colorado River. And so then you have Town Lake, Lake Austin, Lake Travis, and then above that you have Lake Marble Falls, Lake LBJ, you have Inks Lake, and then Lake Buchanan, and then the Colorado River continues to go north where it originates from. So if you are thinking about waterfront on live water, whether that is a river or it is a lake, Marble Falls is a great option for you. The other thing that Marble Falls has is a huge retirement community. So if you are thinking about retirement and you want to be in an area with a lot of other really active retirees with things like golf and, again, water sports, things like that, Marble Falls and more specifically Horseshoe Bay could be great options for you. And in fact, most of the hill country towns don't have major hospitals hills, but Marble Falls does because of that retirement population. So, if you're looking for specific care, you may want to check Marble Falls out and see what that Baylor, I believe it's Baylor Scott and White, see what that hospital offers, because that is kind of the hill country retirement mecca, if you will. Slower pace of life, a little bit less costly than some of the other ones, and again, you do have that access to being waterfront or being very near to the water if that's something that you want. And again, we want to talk about, does it have staying power? Okay, Marble Falls staying power is coming from the fact it's actually closer to Austin than Fredericksburg is. It's about an hour out from Austin, about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes from the Austin airport, and that's going into Austin. Now it's a little bit further to San Antonio than Fredericksburg. It's about 80 miles to San Antonio, and so you're kind of flip-flopping, Fredericksburg being closer to San Antonio, Marble Falls being closer to Austin. But regardless, you're still within about an hour of a major metro area. So you're going to consistently get that flow of luxury buyers out there, not only for, as they retire, but also because of that waterfront luxury, Marble Falls all day long. But again, there's always a few cautionary tales, right? So in Marble Falls, if you're wanting waterfront, it is definitely going to be a premium. The prices out there have skyrocketed over the last 10 years. The other thing to keep in mind is not all lakes are constant level lakes. Some of them are constant level, meaning your dock is going to be sitting in the same spot in that lake all the time, but other ones, Lake Buchanan, Lake Travis, those are not constant level, and they can fluctuate wildly in the summer when we've got droughts. Another thing is, if you want that waterfront, you're going to have to make sure that you have dock rights and make sure that you can put one in if there's not one existing already. And then the HOAs out there can be a little bit more difficult to deal with than in other areas, just because of the type of buyers that are moving out there. So if you are really against HOAs, it's going to be a little bit harder to find something in Marble Falls. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, the third town they talk about in Haven Lifestyles is Dripping Springs, Texas. That's my home. Dripping Springs is really known for acreage lots. Most of them are going to be acre and a half, 2, but you can find larger stuff, 5 acres, 10 acres, especially when you start getting into that luxury. You're going to find a lot of custom homes. Now, we do have master plan communities with traditional tract home builders, Dries, Scott Felder, Meritage, MI Homes, things like that. They exist, but for the most part, especially when you're getting over that $1 million price point, you're going to be looking at custom homes. Now, some of them have been around since the 70s and 80s. Some of them are under construction now or were built last week, but you're going to find a lot of opportunity with custom homes there. And then we get into the longevity. This is the closest town into Austin on this list, okay? From my home, which I'm actually between Dripping Springs and Austin, I'm 30 minutes from the airport, I'm 30 minutes to downtown Austin, and when I walk out on my 5 acres, I see the hills and I have views and things like that. So the longevity here is very strong because of that proximity. So the luxury buyer here is not necessarily just a little bit older, kind of when you're starting to talk 45, 50 years old. You've got a lot of folks that are buying here that are a little bit younger also, with really good paying jobs, but they need to be able to commute into Austin, and that's possible from Dripping Springs. The other thing that is going to continue to be a draw to Dripping Springs is the school district. Again, for that younger buyer that still has kids, the school district is very highly rated, very well thought of, and growing at an extremely fast rate. So when you talk about why are things going to maintain values out here, Dripping Springs is really because of proximity to Austin and because of the school district. Now, just like all the other towns, Dripping Springs isn't perfect, right? So first of all, our growth is accelerating. We're getting a lot of people, again, because we're so close to Austin. The builders have found it. They're starting to build these master plan communities. So that growth is accelerating. If you're looking for a slower pace of life, if you're looking for something that doesn't feel like a suburb, Dripping Springs probably isn't the right answer for you. And if you're looking for real privacy and views, you're probably going to have to buy somewhere north of 5 acres. And I would suggest moving on that fairly quickly, because as more and more of these large land parcels are starting to be bought up by builders and developers, these smaller ones are going to be changing also, right? People are going to go in on 10 acres, and instead of building a really nice custom home, they may put 5 or 6 kind of condo style homes on them and things like that. So with the growth accelerating, we're also seeing it's becoming a little bit harder to find those really nice pieces of property where you get that privacy. A couple of other things you definitely want to consider consider about Dripping Springs is make sure you understand where your utilities are coming from, especially water. Electric's pretty easy to figure out, but your water, you know, you're going to have to dig a well, or you're going to have to do rainwater, or is there a municipal water supply, because we've got a lot of rural municipal water supplies. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then the other thing is we're getting a little bit higher fire risk as we get more people moving out here. So, you know, be prepared. Your insurance is home insurance is a little bit higher in Dripping Springs than some of these other places, just because that higher density of people is leading to a greater fire risk in terms of what the insurance companies see. So you're going to have to plan ahead for a little higher insurance premiums as well. All right, fourth on the Haven Lifestyles list is a little harder to pronounce than the other one. It's called Bernie. Kind of looks like Borney, but yeah, it's Bernie. Bernie is definitely, and the area immediately surrounding it is definitely hill country luxury in a city form. There's been a lot of money spent in Bernie over the last 15 years. It has become an extremely high-end community, but it is also very close into San Antonio, and it makes it easy to get to things like the airport, which is about 20 to 25 minutes away, depending on where you are. You know, being able to get into downtown San Antonio if you want to do nightlife or restaurants or the Riverwalk and things like that. But yeah, Bernie has definitely kind of become its own little animal in terms of hill country luxury lifestyle. And what you're going to find along those lines is there are a lot of, we'll call them neighborhoods, and they're gated communities. They're not really dense in terms of how many houses are in there, though. You know, they're large communities, and for the most part, they're going to be acre and a half lots. So, you know, we'll call them estate luxury communities, because when you drive through, the houses aren't stacked on top of each other, but they are definitely luxury neighborhoods. And for the staying power in Bernie, I've already mentioned it, obviously, is the proximity to San Antonio. And it's really not all that far from Austin either. You're looking at probably about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to Austin. So it's not terribly far from Austin. But proximity to San Antonio, the schools are absolutely excellent, and you have a really, really strong infrastructure. Like I said, there's been a lot of money that's been spent there in the last 15 years. So all of those things kind of combine to just give you something that really doesn't exist elsewhere in the hill country. Again, I said it a while ago, it's kind of its own animal, and it really is. But what that's led to is really strong appreciation, and because of these things, that appreciation is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Now, in terms of the people that are looking in Bernie potentially, it's going to be ideal for buyers that are looking for kind of a club amenity lifestyle, right? Gated enclaves, estate homes, but still manicured yards and things like that. There's quite a few equestrian options in Bernie, but that really exists all over the hill country. And the thing that you've really got to plan ahead for in Bernie is, if you're buying a view, trying to see what you're actually looking at with that view, and make sure that it hasn't been acquired by a developer and it's just going to become another neighborhood in the next 5 years. So just be really aware of what's being built around you in Bernie. And the last one from Haven Lifestyles is New Braunfels. You know, like Fredericksburg, has a really, really strong German history, a lot of cool art festivals and Wurstfest and things like that in the fall. New Braunfels, the big thing about New Braunfels is it is right between Austin and San Antonio. There are a lot of people now who are living in New Braunfels and commuting into Austin again, as well as San Antonio. And the luxury segment there is still one of the most affordable ones. You have Canyon Lake on the west side of New Braunfels, and there's a lot of luxury between New Braunfels and Canyon Lake, and then around Canyon Lake as well. But it's still kind of a fresh market for luxury, so the pricing there is going to be a lot better than what you're going to find, say, like in Bernie or Fredericksburg or Dripping Springs. And in terms of making sure your investment's solid there, again, so close to Austin, so close to San Antonio, you have the ability to do water sports there, you know, on the Guadalupe River, on the Comal River, and on Canyon Lake. There's just so much to do there for such a wide variety of people. It's going to have a lot of staying power. And now a couple of things that you really have to watch out for in New Braunfels. First of all, Canyon Lake is an Army Corps of Engineers lake. So if you buy waterfront property on Canyon Lake, it's not actually waterfront. You're not going to be able to put in a dock and things like that, because the Corps of Engineers owns a strip of land all the way around the lake. Now, you can have amazing views. You can walk right down to the lake and enjoy it. You can slide a kayak across it, you know, and all of that, but it's not true waterfront living. So be aware of that. In terms of the rivers, the Comal, the Guadalupe, and Guadalupe, we're from Texas, we pronounce things our own way. Anyway, If you are looking for a luxury property waterfront that you want to be able to kind of put a little bit of a dock or a deck or something out over the water, right next to the water, you're probably going to be looking for riverfront property. Those are the true legacy property opportunities there. And there's a lot of tourist traffic, especially in the summer. People come down, they're on the river all day. A lot of partying, a lot of having fun, a lot of sunburnt college kids and stuff like that are floating by. So you have to be tolerant of that if that's the lifestyle that you want there. But after dark, when the two places are closed and all of that has slowed down, it does become a real quiet opportunity out there. Now, there are some music venues, an amphitheater that's pretty large with some larger acts. So, make sure that you're kind of paying attention to where you are in relation to all of that stuff. But you can find really, really nice, quiet luxury and an opportunity for legacy, again, in that area west of New Braunfels. And now that I've kind of talked through, what you're going to find in those towns, what makes them special, and why they're being included in that list of luxury destinations, let me give you a little bit more of an idea of if it might be a fit for you based on what you're going to plan for long term. And I talk about this with my buyers a lot, where if you're moving here, you really, really need to understand why you're buying here. If you're trying to buy something for 5 years or 7 years, this probably isn't the right location. If you're thinking long term, I refer to it a lot as a pine box house. They're going to carry you out in a pine box. If you're looking for it as that type of property, as a legacy property, okay, now we know what that long-term goal is. So let's dig in on which of these towns might be a little bit better options for you. So first of all, if you're looking at this as a full-time residence and you're still working, you still have kids, you're more than likely going to be looking in Dripping Springs and Boerne. Again, we talked about how great the schools are. Dripping Springs because of its proximity to Austin, and Boerne because of the proximity to San Antonio. Full-time residents, Dripping Springs and Boerne, those are going to be your opportunities. Are you looking for it as a weekend retreat, maybe a second home, a third home, or something that's going to be a legacy property? Okay, if you're looking for that, then you're probably going to be looking either in Fredericksburg or New Braunfels. Again, because of the views, because you're away from people, or you can get away from people a little bit more than you can in Dripping Springs or Boerne, that's going to be your quiet solitude. That's going to be that legacy property. That's going to be the thing that you can keep in the family for years and years to come. And I mentioned before, your best opportunity if you really, really want waterfront or water views is probably going to be Marble Falls. Now, can you get that waterfront or those water views in New Braunfels? Yes, but the overall beauty, if you compare it, again, the lakes in Marble Falls are absolutely incredible. There's a lot more waterfront opportunities there. And again, the true waterfront stuff in New Braunfels is going to be on a river, so there's just not that many opportunities. But in Marble Falls, there are a lot of opportunities to get on either a lake or a river. So again, if you want that waterfront house, you want that dock, you want the boat down in the lake, it's going to be Marble Falls. So once you've got this narrowed in by your purpose, now we need to talk about the things that you absolutely must have in your property. Okay, do you need that privacy? Do you need that seclusion? Do you need what one of my clients called his naked time to be able to walk out on the back porch, and have his coffee? Do you need a bigger lot? Are you looking for water access? Are you looking for waterfront? Again, those are things that are really, really important to know the differentiation between. And what are you looking for from a build quality perspective? And I bring that up because if you're building something that you're likely going to be, moving out of in maybe 10 or 15 years, you're going to be moving on. Okay, that build quality is a little bit different. It can still be really high end, but that build quality can be a little trendier, and it's going to be a little bit different than if you're looking for a legacy property. People that are buying legacy properties, they're going a little bit more old school. I've seen people building actual stone homes at this point. They're going with timber homes. They're going with things that will withstand the test of time from a construction perspective, but also from they're not trendy. They're things that if you would go to the old world in Europe somewhere, you're going to see some of this same type of construction, and it's again designs that are going to stand the test of time. I mean, you can build an uber contemporary modern home right now, and when you pass it on to your kids and grandkids in 40 years, they're just looking at it like, geez, I've got to completely remodel this whole thing because it's out of style, just like green shag carpet and some of the stuff that we saw in the 70s, right? So, when you're looking at that legacy type property, your mind is going to shift just a little bit, and it should, based on what's going to stand the test of time versus what's kind of hip and trendy right now. Another thing here is you definitely want to check your infrastructure early. You've got the location. Okay, if it's going to be a second or third home, maybe it's Fredericksburg, but you want to check that location because you're still going to need to have access to things like airports, to grocery stores. There's an executive airport in Fredericksburg that if you have a private plane, it could be a good option for you. It is large enough, the runway is large enough to accept jet traffic, but if that's something that you need. So understand what you're going to need from an amenity standpoint, like an infrastructure standpoint up front. Something some people don't think about. Are you okay with the gravel roads, or do you want a paved road? Okay, just because that road is paved doesn't mean it's necessarily cut out for a McLaren or something like that. That's a little bit different thing. So planning what you need from an infrastructure perspective up front is really, really wise thing to do. And then I've mentioned it a couple of times now. You want to think from a perspective of 10 to 20 years out at least when you're identifying these properties. I mentioned, especially in Bernie, if you're buying a view, make sure that view is going to be there for the long haul. And in Texas, you can see, who owns properties, how big properties are, and things like that. If it's owned by an LLC, well, there's a chance of some type of development there at some point in the future. So do that due diligence up front. Make that plan 10 to 20 years out. And you can never fully plan for everything, right? The only way that you could make sure that your view is never going to be spoiled is if you buy the next property behind you and everything that you can see, right? But outside of that, you can plan ahead. You can plan strategically to make sure that it's not completely ruined, even if there is development. So again, plan for that stuff ahead of time. The next thing I want to talk about is something that a lot of buyers, especially if they're coming from out of state and from in metro areas, that they never really fully understand until they're out on acreage. Maintenance costs are going to be a lot more than you think they are, and it's going to take a lot more time to maintain property. That's why I usually try to let people know, hey, if you're okay with 2 acres, I would tend to go 2 acres sooner than I would go 20 or 30. 20 or 30 acres, you're always going to be dealing with grass and weeds and wildlife and trees and having to cut down limbs and all of that. And the more trees you have, the more down limbs you have, the more land you have, the more grass you have to take care of. And even if it's field grass like it is out here, you're still going to want to manage that, for fire suppression and things like that. You're going to want to keep it mowed. I have 5 acres. I mow probably 3 or 4 times a year. And if you're not the kind of person that's going to get out there and do it yourself, if you're going to hire somebody to do it, okay, well, it's not cheap to hire somebody to mow 5, 10, 15, 20 acres of native grasses and weeds. So plan on that ahead of time and understand, are you okay with a little bit smaller piece of property, knowing that maintenance and upkeep and the time involved is going to take a little bit more than what you may have planned. And then the next one is just, it sounds like a terrible real estate thing, right? To act soon. But guys, one thing that I've noticed, even if you're buying land, raw land, and you want to build a custom home on it, the value of land doesn't tend to drop. When you look at housing bubbles and things like that, there's an asset on that land, and that's what's fluctuating in value. But the land itself tends to appreciate more over time. And even right now in this market, where we've seen some declines in the housing market in the hill country, at least in some areas, the value of land is continuing to climb. So if this is something that you're considering, do it sooner rather than later. Again, it takes more thought and prep time than a lot of people really understand. So if you're thinking about it, reach out to me, call me. I've got a checklist I go through, kind of trying to figure out what you're looking for. And there's not as many pieces of property on the market as there are houses. So again, if you're looking for raw land, okay, you may have to look for an extended period of time. If you're looking for a legacy property that already exists, that is a luxury property, especially if you start getting into the the $3, $4, $5 million range, there's not a lot of those on the market, so you're going to be looking for a while. So I always encourage people to start way sooner than you think. Now you have to be ready. If you find the property and you fall in love with it, you got to be ready to buy it. But I always encourage people, start sooner than you think, just because the thing that you're looking for, that perfect property, there's not a whole lot of them out there, and when you do find it, you're going to want to act on it quickly.